Good afternoon. I am Kelly Phillips, and I'm the program director here at TechConnects. TechConnects is a not-for-profit association, and we're currently in our 41st year of operation. As an association, we are focused on being a support community for businesses within the tech industry. And TechConnects is the leader in peer-to-peer programming, and we run a series of programs every month, or peer groups every month, with a strong focus on personal, professional, and business growth. And our programs provide an excellent venue for education, knowledge transfer, and an opportunity to connect with peers and potential clients and partners. At less than $1.25 per day, a TechConnects membership is the most affordable way to connect with and learn from other business leaders to help grow your people and your business. But why you're here today is we all know when a story catches our attention and engages us, we are more likely to absorb the message and meaning within it. Crafting the perfect story is an impactful way to influence, teach, inspire, and build connections among and between people. But how and where do you begin? So today we are very fortunate to have Sumaiya Siddiqi from Esri Canada, and we would love to thank Esri Canada for being a longtime supporter and sponsor of TechConnects. Sumaiya's title up until 2022 was Technical Solutions Specialist, but her new role and title is Storyteller. I think that's just, it translated. That was kind of the tech lingo for it, but it translated to Storyteller, in which Sumaiya conveys information and data in a masterful way so people are able to easily understand, apply, and connect to the information. And Sumaiya has managed to take all the data from GIS mapping and turn it into an engaging story. And we're lucky that she is going to share her secrets with us today. So with that, Sumaiya, I'm going to turn things over to you, but just one quick thing. If you have any questions, feel free either to throw them in the chat or come off mute and ask them or put your hand up. It's an interactive session. And if you want right away, don't let it go by. Sumaiya says, let's get at the question. And obviously we're recording it too, so we will send the information out. So Sumaiya, turn things over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. I feel like I don't even need to introduce myself because you did such a good job. So Kelly pretty much said everything I would have said. My name is Sumaiya Siddiqi. I am at Esri Canada. I've been at Esri Canada for almost 7 years now. And throughout that time, I've had different roles, from very technical roles to now being more of that storytelling role and being able to understand complex information and translate that into something that's a lot more digestible for audiences everywhere. And so one thing we all can't deny is the impact a really good story can have on our lives. And honestly, that's why I love, TechConnect sessions, because so many of them just have all these stories of what people experience, and having these discussions and knowing these stories really help change our perspectives and understand perspectives. And I think TechConnects does a wonderful job of really facilitating that. And so whether you want to be entertained, persuaded, or you want to excite somebody, stories that resonate, pull on our heartstrings, and make us want to be a part of them. So let me share my screen and we can get started on the art of storytelling. So let's get started a little bit on the background of storytelling. So in the history of storytelling, we started off with visual and oral storytelling in 30,000 BCE. So just to clarify, Kelly, you can see these cave paintings?
We can, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we started off with cave paintings and having the idea of hunting events and other things that were happening. Then from there, we went into the Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Mesopotamia, and these had lessons to be learned. So again, there was that purpose of why these stories were being told. Then we move on to ancient Greece, where you had myths and legends. And again, there were those lessons to be learned. Then we took a turn to more written storytelling. So the Iliad by Homer, for example, which had stories for a persuasive goal. And then you had 17th century fairy tales, which again had some sort of lesson for children, and they were very popular and imaginative stories, and they're still very prevalent today. Then we moved on to more modern newspapers and being able to get that information that way. And then in 1826, we had our first instance of visual storytelling. And then in the late 20th century, we moved on to more modern magazines and then mass media storytelling. Now, here we are in the era of digital storytelling. So in the beginning, we had network television, which was really the start of storytelling through moving images to mass media. Then we had our first commercial video game console, which was a sort of interactive storytelling. Then you had music videos, which was pairing audio and moving images to tell a story. And now in the 21st century, we have social media platforms, we have blogs, we have applications, we have the internet where you have access to all this information and stories from around the world. And something that's still very prevalent is just the indigenous and tradition of oral storytelling, where storytelling was always known to be a powerful way to pass on information about culture and history, amongst other things, in indigenous communities. And it's deeply embedded in the traditions and continues to play the same role today. So what can we learn from history? Well, first, storytelling is at the core of human nature. From the beginning, since humans could communicate, storytelling was an important part of human survival. Stories used to be localized, but now they can be shared across the world. Before, stories used to be very limited to one who could actually understand what story was being told, but also just within the vicinity. But today you can hear stories from around the world that are translated to you. And that's great for you because now you can share your stories across the world. And just like that, we came full circle, and now we're using pictures to tell stories for what's most impactful today. So just like the drawings on the cave walls, now we're back to using the images to portray and create impactful stories. And something you need to remember is storytelling is going to continue to evolve. It is at the core of human nature to continue to build on what is already there and make it different or make it better. So what you need to remember is storytelling is an art form, and it's going to continue to change as long as it keeps helping people resonate with whatever message it's trying to come across.
Hanging together, it's good news for entrepreneur guys. And just goes to show that what looks like a very simple move, your bishop sliding one square.
Okay, so working for a mapping company, maps are a huge part of stories. And if you really think about it, maps are everywhere, and every single thing has a location. Whether you have customers, they have locations. You yourself have locations. Anything you see around you has a location. So everything can be mapped out, and all that information can be disseminated into more understandable knowledge. And you see maps everywhere. And even as a child, maps is one of the first things you start to understand. So it is at the core of human nature. So I wanted to go through a few examples of what some stories being told through mapping can look like. So here we have a story map about women in national parliaments. And the story map is about the underrepresentation of women at political leadership levels and how there's a strong correlation of women representation and how that makes a difference. And here you can see a very simple map, easy to read, where you can see the percentage of women in national parliament and where they reside and where that frequency really is. Now, maps can also show, beautiful scenes like protecting the great wetlands of the earth and having beautiful images and being able to visualize different areas and really capture people's attention. And then maps can also be used to do analysis. So here we're looking at global patterns, and this is of wildfires across the world. So this is just looking at the frequency of wildfires. And then you can break that down over if there's an increasing trend, which is in red, or if there's a decreasing trend, to get that information right away. Now, Kelly brought this up, and I quickly brought up this application, but maps can also be localized. So here is the Plow TO map showing when the last time a road has been serviced. So maps can be really used for yourself as well. But, as helpful as maps are, you need to know whether or not you have a story first. So let's get into how we know if we have a story. And that can start off with asking questions such as, will a group of people benefit from the information I have? So if you do a study and you see that it reflects on a certain group some way, well, is it going to benefit them? If it will, well, you have a story. Is there something that surprised you when you were doing research, or you understood something about a project? Well, then you may have a story. After you've understood information, are you asking yourself, well, why or how? So let's say you made more sales in a quarter. Well, you should be asking yourself, why did that happen and how did that happen? And if you are, well, then that can be translated into a story. Does the information you've understood, does it suggest something? Does it evoke something? Does it make a group of people think or feel a certain way? Emotion is a huge part of storytelling. So be very cognizant of that. And if it does, then you've got a story. So another question you can ask is, what do you want more people to know? Do you have some sort of information that you want to make public? Well, if that's the case, then you've got a story. And honestly, anything that involves the public is a story. And something that you want to really consider is, what does the specific tell us about the general? So if you find information about something that's very specific to whatever your situation is, well, how can that be applied to a larger group or a larger population? If you're able to ask yourself that question and wonder about it, well, then you yourself have a story. So now I want to get into this whiteboarding exercise, which I'm excited about how you can break down that story. So now that you know that you have a story, what's next? So something that my colleague and I drew inspiration from when kind of creating this framework of breaking down a story is this. It's a workshop. It's also a free ebook known as Resonate by Nancy Duarte. And Nancy Duarte is she's a consultant and she is the expert of storytelling. And she actually worked with Al Gore on an inconvenient truth. And he was so impressed by how she was able to take all this complex information about climate change and translate that into something that people were able to understand so easily. Okay. So now let's start breaking down the elements of a story. So number one, you want to know is your purpose of your story. So why are you telling the story? This is very, very important. Without the purpose, there is really no direction in your storytelling. So there are two forms of purposes that you can consider. So the first one is a project focused purpose. So that is understanding the need of a project. So what are you trying to solve? How is this going to help? Is there a business problem that you are trying to solve? So for example, the purpose of this whiteboarding session is I very much understand that when you are looking at pages and pages of data and different types of data, it can be very difficult to distill that to an executive, let's say, or to distill that to a customer. And so the purpose of this whiteboarding session is so anybody on this call can have an easier time distilling that information. So something else, another purpose that you want to focus on is whether it is user focused. So this is more about user experience. So once you've, let's say, worked through an application or you're doing, let's say, an iteration of a product, well, are we building to teach something? Was this project a success or a failure? So for user focused, it's very much what I went through, what happened to me. And it's very much, I like to say it's about the past, something that's already happened. And project focus is about a project that's happening now. So it's more about the future and what potential that can have in the future. Now, your story can have one or the other, or it can have both. These are just questions to ask yourself when you're going through the process of breaking down your story. Okay, so now that we have the purpose, our next element is to introduce some characters in the story. Every good story has great characters. And something you need to remember is your purpose needs to resonate with your characters. That is very, very important. So one of our first characters that we are going to look at is the audience. Now, the audience is going to be your most important character. Who are you showing this to? Who is going to be looking at this? Who is going to try to understand this information? Now, with the audience, again, ask yourself the question, who is the audience? Make sure you do all your research into figuring out who you're speaking to, who's viewing the application. And one way to do that is to really engage your audience. So engagement for an audience is very important from the beginning of your story. This is when you're going to capture their intention and you're going to be able to relay that information across, and it's going to resonate with them. So how can you make that information resonate with your audience through engagement? So one way is through evoking emotion. So let's say, for example, I'm telling a story about the problems of needles being found in a neighborhood. So one, I can talk about the neighborhood itself, or focus on a specific area, talk about the dangers. And here I'm going to invoke the emotion of people who live in that neighborhood. So I'm creating that connection right over there. I can also talk about if needles are being found near schools. So now this is going to evoke emotion of school administration, parents, and anybody else who is around that area and who wants to, protect their children. And then also, I can talk about needles being found in a dog park. Well, now I can invoke emotions of pet owners, and people who love animals as well. And then at the same time, I can also talk about how, addiction can be a problem. And then I can invoke those emotions with people who may have family members, or they themselves have gone through those struggles. So emotion is a very important part of helping your audience resonate with whatever story you're telling.
Sumaiya, can I ask a quick question? When you're trying to evoke emotion, and you've actually put together a couple of examples there of who to go through, when you're maybe putting your story together, especially from a business perspective, are you better to key in on one target audience where you're going to evoke that emotion, or try to loop them all together?
So this is where doing your research about your audience, especially who's going to be viewing it at that time. So if you are giving a presentation on screen and you have, let's say you have the school administration, the focus would be more so about schools, but you can also touch on these other issues, but you don't necessarily need to go as deep into them. So from a business perspective, that's where I say, you can have all these different people that are impacted, but always make sure you know who you are presenting to, who's going to be looking at the application, because that's who you want to focus on.
Thanks.
No problem. Okay, so another way to engage is through humor. Now, the one thing about humor I have to say is make sure the story is appropriate for humor. So not all stories are appropriate for humor. So make sure you're very cognizant of that. Also, it's okay to if you're doing a presentation multiple times, it's okay to repeat the same joke. It's practice. If it goes through and hits the home run, why not? Right? And make sure you run your joke through somebody else just to see if it is funny, because the last thing you want to be doing is making a joke and trying to make a joke that may not necessarily be funny. So if you are going to be using humor, just be wary of those. Okay, now something else that is very, very important is you want to make your audience the hero of the story. Remember, you have understood all this information. You know why you're telling the story. You know what you want your audience to do. So you, as the storyteller, you are not the hero. Your audience is the hero, because they are the ones who are going to be taking that message that you're giving to them and doing something with it. So be very aware of that. Now, something that Nancy Duarte said that I really, really liked was, you are not the hero who will save the audience is your hero. And anytime I'm building a story of any sort, I always like to think of that. So we've all been in, situations where, we're at a dinner party and we have we're talking to somebody new and they keep talking about themselves. That is something you do not want to do. A great way to tell a story is to constantly use the word you. And when you use you are engaging your audience. You're engaging the person. You're making it about them. And when you make something about them, that's when they're going to have the most interest, because then there's something in it for them. So you do not want to be this guy. Yeah. Okay. So now, you're thinking, okay, the audience is a character, but what about me? I'm important too. And yes, of course you are. So another character is also yourself in the story. So what is your role as the presenter or the creator? Well, you are going to be taking on a mentorship role in your story. So here we've got Yoda, one of the best mentors of all time. And this is where, remember I mentioned you've processed all this information. You know what you want to happen. You've already slain the dragon. And now you want your audience to slay the dragon. So how can you do that for them? So one, support the hero. Give them the resources they need. Make sure that whatever you want them to do, you're going to help them do it. Give them the guidance, the direction they're going to need. Give them insights. Remember, you are telling the story. So you have the most information about whatever it is you are distilling. So you have that insight and you want to be able to give that insight to your audience. You want to train them. You want to give them advice. And most importantly, you want to instill confidence in them that they can also defeat the bad guy. So that is a very important part. And that is your role in storytelling. Okay, so we have our purpose. We have our characters. What is next? Well, every story needs to have some sort of plot line. And we have put together at Esri this very helpful resource known as a solutions map. And it really is just 2 slides explaining the problem and also the solution. And this is a great exercise you can do with your customers, your colleagues, to just get all that information about the problem, making it very concise for not only yourself to understand, but for your audience as well. So let's go through this simple example. So public agency, so we have a problem statement, the cause of problem, and the negative business impact. So the problem statement is public agencies must establish and implement a method to maintain traffic sign retroreflectivity. So that pretty much means just at nighttime, signs need to be visible. So the cause of the problem, the nighttime crash rate is way too high. And then the negative business impact is failure to adhere to federal mandates is going to reduce sign visibility and then have that increase in crashes and liability. If you are talking to executives, the term liability is a huge one and their ears will perk up. And that's when you can take them to the solution part of the solution map. So here we have a simple how we can solve the problem. And this is, again, a very GIS focused problem, but it's pretty much having inventory of the management system, what the positive business outcome is going to be. So improved sign visibility, reducing crashes, limited liability, increased efficiency, support better decisions, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, something that's very important is the schedule and cost. So what that simplified schedule and cost includes, so hardware, software, workforce, whatever it may be, and the TCO, which is the total cost of ownership. So this is a great, simple exercise that you can do to really get the plot of your story. Okay, so now that we have our plot line, we've got our purpose, we've got characters, we've got our plot. Well, the next most important part is, how are you going to start your story? And the start of a story is either going to involve your audience or it is going to lose your audience. I cannot express how important it is to capture your audience from the beginning, because if you don't, then they will not be as involved throughout your entire presentation. And then unfortunately, all that hard work you put in is not going to give as much return as you would have hoped for. So how can you start? So make sure you engage your audience. And one way to start a story is through bluff. Now, I don't mean lie to them. Bluff is actually a military term, which stands for bottom line up front. So right at the beginning, tell them your purpose. Tell them why they need to be interested. Tell them why you are doing what you are doing. And again, make sure it relates back to the audience. Now, something else you want to do when you start, and it's kind of weird to say, but you want to start in the middle. And what I mean by starting in the middle is you want to show off some sort of wow factor from the beginning. So if you build an application, show that application right away before you get into the nitty-gritty. You want to show them whatever it is, why it's important. Another tip I kind of learned in storytelling is every story needs to have a purple cow. And a purple cow is just something that is the wow factor. Something when somebody leaves from a presentation, that's one thing that they are going to remember. So if you have built something really cool, show that. And remember, when I was breaking down storytelling, I mentioned how images are a huge part of storytelling. So whether it's a presentation, whether you're showing a dashboard, whether you're showing a report to executives, you want to make sure there's some sort of imagery that's going to catch their attention and help them understand a lot easier. Now, one of my favorite examples, and the second Star Wars reference in this presentation, is Star Wars the series starts in the middle. It starts at episode 4, and you literally open up to this fight against good versus evil. Nobody even needs to say anything, but just through the imagery, you're able to get a sense of that. And it's just this epic battle that pulls you in and you just can't stop. So great example for starting in the middle and really engaging the audience. I see Ryan putting his thumbs up for Star Wars references. Woo, woo.
Sumaiya, I was going to say, Trudy even just put in here that she read the book Purple Cow years ago.
Amazing.
So great.
Okay, so now we've got our purpose, our characters, our plot line, our start. Now, obviously, we're going to need an end as well. So how can you end your story? What should be in the end of your story? So first and foremost, what is the takeaway? What do you want your audience to leave with at the end of the presentation or whatever it is you're showing? What is it that you want them to be thinking about after you've stopped talking? That is very, very important to consider and also mention. Now, something else you should have in your end, which is very important, is a call to action. So what do you want your audience to do? You know, you've presented all this information, and of course, you've used this framework, so you've done it in a great way. So what are you telling them to do? Are you telling them to change the way they do things right now? If it's a business process that you're trying to say that we can do this better, well, are you trying to get them to follow you? And again, you need to have that call to action, and that call to action can be in every single story. Okay, so we've got our purpose, characters, plotline, starting, ending. What is left? Something that's last, but definitely not least, is the design of your story. And this is very, very important because right now we are living in this post-COVID world where a lot of things have been translated into being more virtual, maybe not in person. But again, you want to know what form your story is going to be in. So, for example, are you going to be making a PowerPoint presentation? Are you going to be doing a live whiteboarding exercise like we are right now? Are you going to be creating a story map? That's the application I was showing in the beginning. You know, there's so many presentation tools out there, and you want what's best for you. And honestly, sometimes you don't even necessarily need a presentation tool. If you're able to, you know, show images or pictures or visualizations, sometimes you necessarily don't need a PowerPoint presentation. So be very, very cognizant of that. And then something else is knowing how your story is going to be presented. So again, being in this world, is this presentation going to be live? Is it going to be in person? Is it remote? Is it going to be recorded? Is it a web application? This is all information you need to know before you get to designing your story. And then I think the buzzword of this presentation is engagement. You want your design to be engaging. Just like you want your audience to be engaged, just like you want your start to be engaging. So another designing tip is from Guy Kawasaki. And Guy Kawasaki he was the first known technological evangelist. I know that role is changing now, the term of that role, but really being able to take that information and distill it to the general audience. And he worked for Apple, and this is where he discovered the 10-20-30 rule. And that is simply that a presentation should have 10 slides, last no more than 20 minutes, and contain no font smaller than 30 points. So that is something to remember, the 10-20-30 rule. And this also reminds me of another tip I learned about having your message resonate with audiences and have them remember your messaging. And that's the rule of threes. People remember things in threes. So for example, reduce, reuse, recycle. That's something you never forget. And again, the 10-20-30 rule. I'm going to open it up. Does anybody have other examples of any rules of threes?
They're going to come to us later.
I probably.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is very important when it comes to designing a slide presentation, which I know a lot of people do.
Oh, sorry, Sumaiya, there's one. I just thought of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yes.
It gets used a lot.
Yeah. And, like, as you mentioned, Kelly, when people leave here and anytime they're going to hear something in threes, hopefully they click and be like, oh, this is something that falls into the rule of threes. And so
Sean just put one. Now they're coming in here.
Yeah.
Stop, drop, and roll.
Yes.
Sean put in there, and he's like, if you're on fire, that's it. Ryan put snap, crackle, pop.
Yeah.
Rice Krispies. So, and they're ones that you remember. Good.
And so when you were creating your presentation and you were telling your story, have at least one thing that's in a rule of three that the audience can leave with and just remember. Something else, and this is more so towards presentations, is this quote from Winston Churchill, which is, if you want me to speak for 2 minutes, it will take me 3 minutes. It will take me 3 weeks of preparation. If you want me to speak for 30 minutes, it will take me a week to prepare. If you want me to speak for an hour, I am ready now. And that really has to do with how much of a process it can be to take all that complex information you have and put it into a very succinct message. And this really just follows practice, practice, practice. Being able to practice what you are going to say is just going to make it more natural to come out. And, all of us telling these stories, we have that information, right? We have, whether it's data analytics, whether it's just information about sales, whether it's, GIS analysis, whatever it may be. I can talk about data analysis for an hour, but if you are getting an executive in front of me who I need to relay that message to, they don't have that time. And so you need to be able to get that messaging across. And the best way to do that is to practice. And I say that because a lot of people are not comfortable with just public speaking, whether it's in front of 2 people or whether it's in front of 1,000 people. So again, it's all about being comfortable with what you're saying and being confident in what you're saying. I'm going to come back to, you have slain the dragon. You know what it takes. Now it's time for you to help them slay the dragon and get that confidence out there. So here are also some resources that are very, very helpful. And again, these are from Nancy Duarte. She's got a like a workshop on slidology and also about data stories. So these are great resources to also think about investing in, taking the training. The initial one that I mentioned, Resonate, is a free ebook that you can get. So I know afterwards there are a few resources that I want to send to everybody. So this will definitely be in the list of resources.
And I was just going to say here, and I'll send out, thanks, Judy, I will, or Trudy, I will copy this as well, your YouTube, because she's put in here, I took a course on memoir writing in 2021 and found a YouTube video where Brooke Warner talks about takeaway. So I can share that. But as Sumaiya said, we will send out some resources as well as the link for the recording too.
For sure. So as a part of my story, we are now nearing the end. So if we scroll back here, my takeaway that I want everybody to go home with after they're done is, yes, your data can be complicated at times. Yes, it may be a lot, but if you do follow a framework where you can break down what your data is really saying, and you can break down what your story can look like, then it can easily be translated for your specific audience to understand the information and then take it away. And then my call to action is to use this framework. You know, like this was an exercise that my colleague and we had built. And now it is something that I do before my presentations. It's something I do before I build demos. It is something I do before a lot of exercises. And it is just so simple to really do. And I'll show you this example. I had a presentation for this not-for-profit I was helping out with at Esri. And, you know, I had built all these applications for them. And I had to tell them how all these applications could be used to help them in their purpose. So I went through this exercise where I wrote out the project purpose, the user, I put out all the characters. And again, I did a lot of research in my for this exercise. You know, I reached out to the contact at the organization asking about who was going to be in the audience. You know, having an audience of 30 people, there are going to be different people. So this is where, you know, you can get a sense of who's there and where you need to put that emphasis. And then again, you know, I mapped out my start, I mapped out my end, my call to action, and then I also had that design there. So I'm going to be packaging all this information and going to be sending it to Kelly so she can distill all this information to everybody. And this concludes the presentation, but I was hoping to, you know, also start a discussion about, well, what stories have really resonated with you in the workplace, in business? Where do you see stories occurring?
Looking at your framework, and I had used the book Resonate as my guide when I did my TEDx talk script, and it was amazing how helpful it was to help me figure out what the heck I was going to talk about for 15 minutes. But when I see people, when I'm on a webinar, or I'm in somehow there's a sales pitch, and Sumaiya, what you're saying about you, the speaker, the storyteller, is not the hero. Generally, I find they spend so much time talking about their journey and all of the challenges they had and how they overcame them and how their solution now is going to help me, assuming I have the same challenges. They spend so much time on that. I'm tuning out. Like, yes, I need to understand they build the expertise. Like, I need to understand why they might be able to help me if I have those challenges. So I need to know that they've been where I am. That's helpful. But generally, I find they spend way too much time on that.
And that's the thing, that the information that they're giving you is helpful.
Yes.
Ultimately, that information you do need.
Yeah.
But if it's not presented in the right way, no matter how helpful it is, it's just not going to translate to your audience.
Exactly. Yeah.
That was a really good observation.
Yeah.
I think a key, kind of tying into what Jane said, and then Sumaiya, your point here, is keying into the emotion and how it can relate to your character in the story, is being able to pull on that. And as Jane said, I need to know how it's going to help me. So it's kind of telling my story through how this is going to, how your product is going to help me. So it's my story kind of goes through. So
yeah. And a huge part of that is also not only relaying the information, but actually understanding the emotion. Sorry, not just relaying the emotion, but understanding the emotion, understanding what that person may be going through, understanding what that group may be going through. So even though you don't belong to, even if you don't belong to that group, you're still empathetic, and you can still, and people can sense genuineness. I think that's a huge part of presentations and storytelling as well. People can definitely sense if you are being genuine or not. And if you are genuine, that connection is just so much more stronger that people come back to you and they say, you helped me in this way. Look what I'm doing with what you showed me. And there's that excitement. And honestly, like, I think storytelling is really fun. And storytelling, we're talking about business right now, but storytelling is everywhere. You storytell constantly. Like Kelly, you were mentioning about like storytelling to your daughter and like how that has to be constant. And again, it evokes inspiration, right? What are you trying to get out? Are you trying to inspire somebody? And I just think that's really important as well.
Anybody else have any questions or observations, or something that you wanted to ask Sumaiya about how you get started? Even she's laid out a whole map, which we definitely will share there. But anybody have any questions? We talked, Fabio, I see you're going to have go ahead.
It's a bit, I guess it's more for the future. How is this going to change with AI, like ChatGPT? How are we going to integrate that with storytelling?
I think it still needs to be tested right now. I think it's very, very early on with, I know it's very popular. I've used it myself and it's been a very, very helpful tool. Yeah. But again, I think a huge part of, AI can really lay out that plot for you. It can lay out kind of the direction of the story for you. But I think something that us as humans have is that emotional connection and understanding where that emotion needs to be placed within a story that I think AI doesn't necessarily have, maybe right now. But I definitely think like it's such a powerful tool. You know, it really gives you kind of that direction of what the story is going to look like. Cool question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting tool because I was seeing schools are using it now. Some teachers are kind of embracing it and being able to get students to use it in their homework process, because I know, hey, now you can use it to write your paper on something, but as they go through, they're trying to use that and then change it and still add the human element to it.
I tried a couple of times, so I gave him some like list items, and I asked him, okay, put that in a full paragraph with a positive spin, and it actually was able to just use those brief, concise comments and expand in something that I could use in an email or in a review. So it was actually very, very useful.
It's amazing. It's an amazing tool that's really been put out.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, as I see that we're at 1 o'clock, I would love to thank Sumaiya for sharing all your insights and your passion for storytelling and being able to package it in an easy way for us to understand and lay things out. I think a lot of times we do learn kind of the elements of storytelling, but it's so great to revisit it and think things through. Thank you very much to Esri Canada for being a great sponsor and supporter of TechConnects. It allows our members and anybody else joining to be able to, attend these and learn and connect with other business leaders. And then on your threes, your rule of threes, it's something we actually use, and it's connect, share, and learn. Ooh. So thank you very much. We've had the opportunity to connect with other people. Sumaiya has been able to share her insights along with other people, and we've all walked away and learned something today. If you would like to attend a peer group through the month of February, you can contact myself or my colleague Ryan in there. Our information is on the website. We do have all kinds of other things, but as we said, we're the leader in peer-to-peer programming, and it's great. It's a great opportunity to always learn from others. I think you walk away with a nugget. I know somebody actually was telling me, I hold on from something that Jane had said. Jane, you told the story about eating the frog every day. And somebody said, I remember that every single day. And it was kind of like, that's the first thing you do is eat the frog. That's the hard thing. Tackle that and off you go. So somebody did learn something. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at future events. Have a fantastic day, and we will see you later. Thanks again, Sumaiya.